Hello, everybody. This is Brian from Breaking Down Security. Part 2 of our interview with Liz Fong Jones is about to happen. You're going to find this week, we're going to talk about what a developer advocate is in terms of how they help companies and other developers understand tooling and what is necessary to get their tooling started. I actually thought that this was far different than what I normally see in the InfoSec industry, and when security companies talk about their tooling with, you know, the normal rank and file in a security organization, it usually requires them to go and talk to their CISOs. Well, you're going to hear us discuss what a developer advocate does in more detail. You're also going to hear us discuss recent pen test that Liz Fong Jones's company had, and they were able to use their tooling to track the pen test as it was happening, which is quite interesting. And we also discuss some recent issues setting up SSH on a machine that and some of the documentation needed to do so when setting up 2FA. So if you've ever needed to set up 2FA on an SSH server and secure it, there's a link in our show notes to a GitHub page where Liz has codified all that documentation, so it'll make your job a whole lot easier. And that's all I got. So let's go ahead and get started with the show. Okay, so before we'd started the show, you said there were some other topics we could discuss for show number 2 here. You said using Honeycomb for digging into access logs and retracing what pen testers do. How easy is it to do that? And I mean, you mentioned access logs in particular. Are there any other logs that are helpful that could be configured to use with Honeycomb that would help, like auth logs? Are auth logs something that's very important to collect as well for this?
So this is a fun incident that we had a couple of months ago where Amazon alerted us that, hey, someone is connecting to nmap.org port 22 from your machines, right? That clearly should not be the case. That was that's a very obvious, loud pen test, right? When someone forces your machines to connect to nmap.org port 22.
Right.
So our first thought was, oh my God, have we been breached, right? Has someone actually been actively rooting around on our servers? And we were able to retrace what was going on by examining what requests was that one server processing, what caused it to talk to nmap.org port 22. And, we were able to not just find the request that caused it, but also be able to see where our code thought that it was supposed to be talking to nmap.org port 22. It turned out to be a webhook parser that we provide you with the facility to request a callback on a webhook when one of your Honeycomb alerts fires. And someone had typed in the nmap.org port 22 address as a webhook, and we were just naively fetching it, right? And that was a super interesting situation where we had the requisite telemetry to be certain that we hadn't been breached, right? That our own code had been tricked into talking to nmap.org, but that there wasn't an attacker rooting around in our network because the contents of that webhook request were specified by us. So that was kind of a really cool example of being able to not just have kind of access log data, but to have kind of really definitive data coming out of your own code telling you what it's doing and why, so you can understand exactly, what that user did. And then we started looking through, what else did that registered Honeycomb user try to do in that exploratory testing session, which was kind of awesome.
Okay, so So once you found out that the application was going to nmap.org port 22, and you were analyzing all these logs, why did Amazon reply back to you? Are they also using? Well, I don't want you to tell me if Amazon's using your product, but why was Amazon had any skin in this game? Was it they wanted to know if somebody had already filled out a pen test form or what?
This is just the standard Amazon Guard Duty product, which is on by default, I think, for most Amazon accounts. So it lets you know when there is anomalous activity on your account, including when your machines start SSHing to hosts outside of your own VPC. So that was really, really super informative and helpful to us. And, that's kind of Amazon doing their due diligence, because they would rather let you know that something suspicious is going on than have to, comp 50% of your AWS bill if you get hacked and you start mining Bitcoin, right?
Sure.
So it's kind of one of those things where it's good for you and good for them if they take a role in monitoring your VPC logs.
Mm-hmm. So when you noticed that somebody was using that environment for penetration testing, or somebody was, pen testing an environment that Honeycomb was getting logs from, did you notify the customer or that, hey, we saw
this? No,
this
was our environment. They'd signed up as a Honeycomb customer, and they were trying to force us to do interesting things, right?
Oh.
So it was kind of really, really cool in that we caught them in the middle of it. We fixed it by the time they sent us the bug bounty report. And it was actually a thing where we actually were able to be more creative than them. And we were like, hey, wait a second, this couldn't be used to exploit anything outside of our network, because, we're sending a payload of a HTTP webhook request to nmap.org port 22, or, any port 22, right? That's just going to be rejected. That's not an actual protocol. Mm-hmm. But what we thought was, hey, wait a second, this person should not be allowed to issue arbitrary requests, including, this person should not be able to send requests to 10.x.x.x, right? So we actually proactively hardened even more than what the pen tester reported to us, right? The pen tester reported we can force connection to nmap.org, but the thing that we actually fixed that we discovered because of the pen testers work indirectly was we fixed the fact that people could use the webhook mechanism to cause URLs on our own network to get hit. It never returned any data, right? There was no risk of data exfiltration, but there certainly was the risk of someone, causing us to restart our processes if they were poked on the right URL or whatever.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. I guess you mentioned a bug bounty program, which would make sense why you're you're doing the transparency deal with the blog posts and incident response that we talked about last week. So, was the testing that they were doing outside of the scope of what of what had been set by your bug bounty program, and did that cause any issues inside your organization with changes that needed to be made?
Oh, no. Everything that they did was completely within the realm of the bug bounty program. They were exploring for defects in our web UI, and they definitely, they found that they could make us connect to arbitrary URLs and ports. So That was something that was, I believe, but, don't quote me on this, I believe that we wound up paying out on that bug bounty, right? Nice. We really appreciate when people help make our products more secure.
That's awesome. Okay. All right. So one of the last. I'm sorry, Mr. Betcher, Ms. Berlin. Any questions?
No, I just really like the transparency. I wish more places would do that.
Yeah, I'm like, I feel like I could almost ask her anything, but it's like, probably I could.
I think this is kind of the virtue of being a startup, right? Like, it's that we have more to gain than more to lose from being transparent, right? It means that people talk to us about these issues, people become confident that we know what the heck we're doing, more or less, right?
Right.
Whereas I used to work at Google Cloud, and oh boy, the way we would water down the public incident report versus the internal postmortem, right? Whereas here, we find the best policy is to be as transparent as we can, because that actually increases customer confidence that we'll tell them when there's something going on and that they can believe us.
Right. Okay. Okay. So I'm there. One of the last things that you brought up in the show notes was discussion of two-factor auth on SSH connections. But I actually have another question here, and we're going very far afield, and we weren't expecting this. But it says under your markdown, it says, "Hi, I'm Liz, a developer advocate at honeycomb.io." I don't know if people are going to say, "Okay, boomer," or whatever it is, but what is a developer advocate, and why are they needed?
That's a wonderful question. So developer advocates are the people who really bridge the needs of developer communities and other engineering communities with engineering organizations who are developing products, right? So we are the people who help make sure that your security appliance, right, is designed to actually meet your needs and not just, the suits upstairs, right? So we're the people who actually talk to you at conferences, write blog posts, listen to you. We do a lot of listening, right? So kind of our goal is to keep a pulse of what's going on, what problems are people actually having, and make sure that our products are actually solving the needs that you have. So in the case of Honeycomb, I'm doing a lot of work around making sure that people both understand how observability can help them, but also communicating back to my organization, this is where people are, this is where we need to meet them, this is the product that we need to build.
Okay, so you're not sales. See, when I think of developer advocate, I'm thinking more along the lines of like a union boss or somebody who's like, oh, these developers are getting put upon and, against the evil corporation. You're like the person, running interference.
Personally, I do also happen to be a labor advocate in the kind of union boss sense that you're talking about. It kind of comes naturally, though, right? Like in that if you spend your time listening to developers, you don't just hear about their technical challenges, you also hear about their kind of people-related challenges, too.
Okay.
But kind of the core job description is definitely, are we building the right product? Is it meeting people's needs? And are we telling people about the product in ways that make sense to them?
Right. So you're not like the salespeople just throwing a Gartner white paper at them and going, look, here's why you should buy our stuff because we're in the upper right quadrant.
Yeah, I tend to work much more developer to developer rather than pitching the suits. I do occasionally talk to people who are interested in how do I start down the observability journey? But, I don't lead with the Gartner report, right? It's much more, in my experience, this is what I've seen in organizations like yours, right?
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely, it's a engineering role, it's a product role, it's somewhat of a marketing role, somewhat of a sales role, but it's kind of much more heavily product and engineering than sales and marketing.
Yeah, see that. So, Ms. Berlin, Mr. Betcher, please feel free to jump in here. But that seems like that's counterproductive. That a different way than what we do in the information security world, where it's not developer to developer. Here's why you should buy our product. It's usually marketing person or salesperson to CISO or CIO level person at RSA, and then we end up inheriting a bunch of shit because they're in the upper right hand quadrant. This is a very interesting take on how things are sold to people. So you actually get the developers of that company on board with your product and then move to the higher level?
Exactly.
Folks?
It's a grassroots role, right? You kind of have to work people from the bottom up and top down in order to really build products that people love rather than products that people, put up with or even hate and are trying to rip out of their systems.
God. Wow.
That seems completely opposite.
Yeah,
no, but
usually it's we bought this product, now figure out how to install it and use it and all that.
Right.
Splunk.
Oh.
Yeah, that's how it normally is. Yeah, I mean, numerous times I've had salespeople try to, hey, what's the name of your CISO? I'd like to maybe have lunch with him. And what that means is I'm getting stonewalled by you, and I need to make a sale, so I'm going to go talk to your CISO and get that shit done. So.
Yeah, right. It's counterproductive in the long term. I'd rather make sure that either Honeycomb is right for you, or if it's not, refer you to a better product that's more suited for your needs, right? Like you're just going to churn in 2 months because I like you, right? That doesn't help me.
Right. Well, yeah, with Honeycomb, it's so it's a little easier to take your product out of the environment, though, isn't it, than if it was, say, a Tenable or not. I'm not saying Tenable's evil like that, but once these are big systems that usually, like security, it takes months and months to put it in, like a tripwire or something. And once it gets in, they're pretty much embedded and ingrained, and it's hard to get them out. For you guys, it's pretty much a couple of lines of code in somebody's serverless Heroku app, and then there's no other they're no longer using you for all intents and purposes, right?
Yeah, I think it's kind of, on one hand, we aim to be sticky in the sense of people can add additional key value pairs, right? It kind of supplants logging. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, we're actually partnering with a lot of our competitors to create a open telemetry standard so that people don't have to rip it all out if they change vendors, because we've all recognized people have gotten burned by vendor lock-in so many times that it helps us much more to just cooperate on saying, this is what the standard is. And that way people have freedom of choice, which I think is kind of really inspiring and awesome to see that people are willing to set aside all these differences and say, you know what, it's better if we all have the same standard.
That's how Oracle really got married to a bunch of organizations. And it's a great product, right? But every once in a while, you'd get a query that just takes forever. And they would come up and say, you know what, if you give Oracle a hint, your query would run like nanoseconds as opposed to an hour. right? And so they put in these hints in their code, and 1 or 2 years goes by and you can't use another product,
right?
Because then you would have to go through your code and take out all the hints, right?
Little Oracle hints, yeah.
Yeah, so kind of the goal here is to make that hinting system, as it were, right, where you provide hints to yourself about what your code is doing, right, to make that something that will work with any vendor. So that's what OpenTelemetry is doing, and that's a really cool open source project that I work on as well as part of my role at Honeycomb.
We have the one other thing that we want to talk about, but I definitely want to have you back on to talk about that OpenTelemetry item. If there's anybody else you'd like to bring on to help discuss that, I would love that, because it sounds like that's pretty awesome, having some open instrumentation where everybody can just plug into a socket or plug into something and have the same logs across the entire enterprise. I mean, you're not going to see that with the with the SIMs out there, like the Splunks and the Ms. Berlin.
Never.
Are they all different, Ms. Berlin?
yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
yes.
some of them, some of them will take there's a lot of places that'll just ingest from NXLog or ingest from whatever, right, but so many places have their own infrastructure and endpoint agents that you need to use.
Right.
And then you still have to build the SIM basically from the ground up most of the time.
Yep.
To say a nice thing about Splunk, they actually are one of the contributors to OpenTelemetry. So maybe you'll see them embrace portability in their core product and not just the tracing product that they acquired recently. So, there's hope on the horizon.
Right on. Okay.
Never know.
Yep. So one of the last things that I mentioned the developer advocate thing, but you've also been working on trying to harden up SSH, going beyond just public-private key pairs, but using two-factor.
Yeah, so I left Google in January of last year, and I had a serious culture shock when I went to a startup because a lot of the practices at Google are kind of provided for you by the security engineering team. So you don't have to think about them. And then you land at a startup and you're like, wait a second, we're missing this, right? And the thing is, every startup is missing this. So at Google, you do not have direct access to production, right? You have to tap your second factor YubiKey when you're actually connecting to production. Whereas the state of the art in a lot of startup ecosystem has been, you get a key pair and you get a key pair and you get a key pair, and any of you can SSH to your production machines. You're lucky if there's even a bastion in place. Good news, Honeycomb had a bastion, but Honeycomb did not have protections against people stealing your nlock SSH key out of RAM, right? And then having free reign through your production systems.
Right.
So when I got to Honeycomb, I was like, wait a second, this doesn't exist. I'm putting my foot down, we're doing this. So I wound up writing up a guide on how to turn on either second factor, just time OTP access to production, or secure hardened, YubiKey SSH key access to production, to kind of force someone who's trying to attack any developer on my team to work a little bit harder, to actually force someone to tap that security key and not get just, instant access to production just because you got access to the machine.
Mm-hmm. How difficult was the culture shift for the folks at Honeycomb to all of a sudden need to have these keys to be able to do this work?
I think there was a little bit of tooling work that we needed to do on our side, right? Like there are some deployment processes to test environments that relied upon repeatedly opening SSH connections. Mm-hmm. So I think that was a lot of the pain, was just getting people to change that workflow to reuse that connection and just deploy all of the stuff in one go rather than needing multiple reconnections.
Right.
The other thing was that I realized that I was initially being too dogmatic. I was originally saying, security key or touch on your MacBook's touch ID bar or whatever, right? Or get out. Mm-hmm. But people were not happy with that, right? People asked legitimate questions like, hey, what happens if I leave my keys at home, right? What happens if X, what happens if Y? And I said, what, actually that's reasonable. I'd rather have something that people use and are delighted by rather than saying that they're, grudging about and happy with. Right. So that's when I did the extra work to say, okay, either you need a secure hardened key, or you can enter a two-factor code from your phone. Either one of them is good enough, but if you don't have either of those two, you're not getting connected to our bastions anytime today.
Very cool. Yeah, I think I've set this up. It had to have been about 3 or 4 years ago, but I do remember using the PAM module. It works in pretty much any Linux. The OAuth tool. I think I tried it once with the Duo push stuff. I think it works fairly well. What kind of gotchas did you have when you were setting this up? Did you have any issues where you were setting it up and you're like, well, why doesn't this work? And it's like, oh, yes, you have to flip this one switch or install this one.
Oh, lots of them. That's why I wound up writing up the chef recipes so anyone can download them and get going. There's lots of issues of how do you actually configure PAM correctly, especially if your startup doesn't have a security engineer, right? Mm-hmm. You got to make sure that people actually don't lock themselves out. I didn't lock myself out because I know what I'm doing, but, stuff like that can seriously be an impediment. The other thing was it turns out to be surprisingly hard to mandate either or authentication, where so I actually had to get a patch accepted into the libpam SSH key checker, where it checks to see whether your SSH key matches a certain list of SSH keys, because I wanted people who did use security keys to have an incentive of, hey, you don't have to enter a two-factor code anymore.
Right. Okay. Did any YubiKeys work, or is it just specific types? I
implemented pretty broad support. Any YubiKey, not the super cheap U2F only ones, so not the blue colored ones, but any black colored YubiKey will work. And also, if you have a touch bar Mac, I set up instructions for someone to use SE key, is what it's called, the secure element key.
Okay.
And I also set up things for people who are using Crypt. If people aren't familiar with crypt.co, it's a really awesome two-factor auth, kind of similar to Duo, except for more open source.
Okay. Very cool. All right, I'll go look that one up here. Let's see, crypt.co. All right. Cool. How were there any places you think you shouldn't implement 2FA or use maybe, public-private key pairs with passwords or anything like that? Or should you still use the public-private key pairs and 2FA?
I think that it's dangerous to rely on your passphrase on your SSH key to protect you, because if someone gets access to your computer, they're going to go sniffing through your RAM to find your decrypted SSH keys. I think that it is a sensible measure to have like some kind of PIN or passcode on your YubiKeys, right? But at the end of the day, what matters is you as a human need to authorize attempts to access your keys, that you cannot rely upon your computer to protect your keys. You need something else. So that's kind of my general recommendation, is for anything you actually care about where you're handling customer data, like actually look after that data as if it's your own, right? Like you wouldn't have your Gmail account with no two-factor auth. So why are you running around with customer data not protected by two-factor auth?
Yep. No, completely understand. Is that Miss Berlin?
No, the sirens are coming from my end. Let me mute.
Oh no, that's okay. Miss Berlin gets trains and dogs, and I've got cats and stuff. So don't worry about it. We're very informal here. Cool. All right. So, Ms. Berlin, Mr. Boettcher, do you have any other questions about two-factor, enablement with SSH, or digging into what Pentesters will do with your logs?
I've never even attempted to do it on SSH, so that's super interesting to me.
Cool. Mr. Boettcher, you're doing that LogMD bit. Have you looked into OpenTelemetry as a way of unifying your log files or being able to convert Windows logs into something that's more useful?
Convert Windows logs into something more useful?
Well, something that's more easily ingestible.
That's impossible.
Oh.
You say that, but there's actually some folks called Cribble, CRIBL.io, and they are working on kind of being this universal log ingest, where they will ingest logs in any format, they'll prettify them and output nicely formatted JSON that you can send to, yes, Splunk, but also Honeycomb, and yes, also open source solutions, right? It's kind of this really cool thing that they call an observability pipeline, where they can take anything that is in any format and make it useful to you.
Very nice. Oh, we'll put that in the show notes. Cribble, CRIBL.io. Cribble. Okay, cool. All right. Well, Liz, excellent excellent shows here. Appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with us here. if people wanted to find out more about, developer advocacy or, SSH two-factor or honeycomb.io, how would they go about finding that out?
I am at Liz the Gray on Twitter, and I am also lizthegray.com, so you can find me in either of those two places.
Okay, awesome. Okay, are you going to be speaking anywhere? It seems like you're fairly prolific. You be speaking in at any conferences, developer conferences, anything like that?
Yeah, I am actually talking to you from a hotel room in Seattle because I am speaking at a conference called DeliveryConf, which is focused on continuous integration, continuous delivery, and things like DevOps, DevSecOps. So my talk is the closing keynote tomorrow. So, you're literally catching me on the road at a conference.
Well, you're in downtown Seattle. I'm out in Snoqualmie right now. That's where I live out here east of Seattle. So we're only about 30 miles from one another. So I'm glad you could enjoy our lovely rain. We just got over the snow. So maybe we can meet up. If you get out here again in April, B-Sides Seattle's happening over at Redmond campus, that little software joint over there. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, there's a couple of people from my company who are remote out of Seattle, so I wind up coming here to work with them every couple of months.
Fantastic. Well, no pressure, but they do have a CFP open. So if you're interested in maybe talking about DevOpsy stuff, they are looking for speakers to talk at B-Side Seattle.
Certainly, if I can't do it, my two coworkers who are based here in Seattle would be happy to submit something.
Right. So I wasn't trying to put anybody on the spot, but nerd_monkey Josh, one of the organizers, asked me to post up, that they're looking for speakers because they've doubled the size of their conference. They've moved to a bigger building from the Commons at Microsoft to Building 92. So they're looking for more speakers this year. So they even asked me to come and speak, and I laughed, and I was like, "What? Me? No." They are looking for speakers if anybody's interested in doing that. So, okay. Well, I'm out of things to talk about. Miss Berlin, Mr. Betcher, anything else you'd like to mention before we go?
I don't think. My next speaking thing is at the SE Village conference in Orlando.
Okay. And when is that?
End of February.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of seats still left in my class. So
right. And
free.
as you mentioned last week, you're going to be at SHMU at the end of this month, end of January. Yep. Mr. Betcher, are you going to be speaking anywhere? I know besides Austin's coming up soon.
I'll probably be at B-Sides Austin. Don't know if I'm speaking though.
Okay.
Probably not.
You should. You should talk about the hazards of working on a project that you're the only developer on or something. I don't know.
Right.
All right. Well, Ms. Berlin, if people wanted to talk to you about, mental health hackers or, InfoSec roleplay or, just yourself being the awesome person that you are, how would they find you or talk to you?
Yeah, so my Twitter is at InfoSystir, INFOSYSTIR. Also at Hackers Health for the mental health hackers, and my new one at InfoSec Roleplay for my D&D style tabletop trainings.
Awesome. Okay. Mr. Betcher, how about you and LogMD?
Yeah, log-md.com. Check it out.
Okay. And your personal Twitter is?
At BetcherPwned.
Okay.
BOETTCHERPWNED.
Fantastic. All right. So the official Brakesec podcast Twitter is at Brakesec, BRAKESEC, and you can follow me on Twitter at Brian Brake. I'm not cool. I don't have a cool hacker name or anything like Miss Berlin.
We'll get you one eventually.
I'm afraid of what it'll be when it happens.
Exactly.
So InfoSec Campout, we're actually having our officers meeting to discuss that. It's going to be happening August 28th and 29th of 2020. More information about the tickets will be coming up soon. Tickets, call for workshops. We do actually have a handshake agreement with Miss Berlin to do one of her InfoSec roleplay games at the conference because she's going to be attending InfoSec Campout. So she's got a free ticket to the conference, and she's going to run some workshops for us. But we are potentially looking for another workshop that might deal with more binary analysis or red teaming or pen testing or something. So if you're interested maybe in doing that up here in the Seattle area, let us know and we'll see what we can do to try to accommodate that. You can send us an email to bds.podcast@gmail.com. Active Slack community here. The podcast prides itself on its community building, and our Slack is probably our magnum opus in that respect. Self-policing, we have a social contract. We require people to be civil to one another. We have a no politics requirement, and we do have moderators. You've met and heard them more than once. David and Megan Roddy and JB and Dave Sybuck and Director of InfoSec, amongst others. If I've forgotten anybody, God, I'm so sorry.
Did you say Scott?
Scott Pack. Oh, he'll get me. Oh, goodness. Scott Pack.
Oh, poor Scott.
No, I love him, man. I love him. I just, so many names. So if you're interested in that, send us an email to bds.podcast@gmail.com or hit us up at Brakesec Twitter, and we'll get you in there. And we have a lot of stuff going on. CTF Club, Serial Ponies in there doing CTF Club walkthroughs of XXE Labs. He's running through some walkthroughs of retired Hack the Box boxes. We have a book club which is starting up again. JB's running that, so we have a book club every Saturday morning for the European and Asia Pacific region, and then we have one that I believe is during the week for U.S. based folks. So if you're interested in doing that, the books are ready and getting started in the next few weeks here. So feel free to join us. We have a TPub site, and thank you to all of our patrons. You can grab some swag from our TPub site. I never remember to bring this stuff up, and I should. So if you're interested in helping out the podcast or helping out the InfoSec Education Foundation, which is our nonprofit we use for the conference, you can send us donations on PayPal or through our Patreon. And TPub site where you can get a t-shirt or what have you, or any other paraphernalia, is tpublic.com/users/BDS podcast. And we're on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play Store, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Player.fm, Stitcher. We're on TuneIn Radio. We're pretty much anywhere you want us to be, and there's no reason why you can't find us. So that was it for this week on Breaking Down Security. Next episode after this is going to be very interesting and might be a little contentious. So I'm looking forward to. We have that little thing we're going to do, you, me, and Mr. Betcher, about some Twitter drama that happened over the holiday. So, Liz, sorry.
Oh, is it that Twitter drama? I bet I know which one it is. Oh my God.
There's been so much, though. There's been so much.
Yeah. Well, we want to do it in a somewhat controlled environment, so we'll definitely have that. So, Liz, very much grateful for you coming on the show. I've learned a lot here just talking about developer advocates, because I had no idea what exactly they did. I just thought they were helping developers who arguably have already all the power anyway get better. And I was like,
no, there are developer advocates dedicated to the security community as well. Actually, my friend Chris Nova works at Falco.
Yes.
So she does developer advocacy for Falco for the security community. It's great.
Yes, I follow Chris Nova. Awesome person.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So learned so much with what it's great to see a company being as transparent as y'all's is, and don't change. Don't change. You should be a model for everyone else.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cool. All right, Liz. Thank you. And that was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Have a great week. Be kind to one another. Take care of yourself, because you are the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.